Perfect. We'll go ahead and start this meeting. Bring it to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Just want to remind you, please make sure you silence your cell phones. If you need to step out to make a call or have a conversation, please do so. Also, I know we all don't agree on things, but this needs to be a safe space for all. So please be polite and respectful. I'm not asking you to be best friends with everyone in the room, but I'm asking you to just be caring and respectful to each other throughout this meeting, please. The mission of the Nampa School District is to ensure high levels of achievement for every student. Vision statement. Every student is fully engaged in extraordinary learning experiences, preparing for successful transition to the next stage of life. Excellent. Nampa Education Association.
Our president is here, Brian Coffey.
Good evening, everyone. It feels like a long time ago, but when I first came and introduced myself, so much has happened in between. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I don't have a clear mandate from our membership on any of the controversial issues that you have all been wrestling with. So I really just want to take this time to commend the staff, all levels of the Nampa School District, certificated, classified, and admin, in trying to make this work. They are bending over backwards, going above and beyond the call of duty every day to cover classes, to take students into their classrooms, for really what is no compensation either. Our current system, as you probably know, we have some comp time, but since the comp time can't be taken to create a sub requirement, then it's largely going to be illusory this year. I also don't know that monetary compensation would necessarily fix it. Many people are at the end of their rope. I noticed on the agenda that under my slot says something about, I think, high quality instruction. I assume that's a board, meeting flag. And so I have, I worry about that. Just at my school in Nampa High on Friday, my understanding is that we're a couple of classes that were basically stuck in the cafeteria at the end of the day. I don't think that, can continue and have it be high quality instruction. Once in a while, sure. But given that nobody knows when this will end, how long these conditions will persist, is certainly worrying and troublesome. But in the meantime, I think you should all be very proud of the staff that you have here, and I certainly am. So, happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions? Thank you, Brian. We appreciate it. We have our trustee comments. Start over here. So trustee Rouse. Thank you.
I did attend the Idaho School Boards Association virtual meeting. I don't know if anyone else did. There are 9 resolutions. They all do pass from the governing board. And then chair and vice chair, I believe the West Beta chair was attending and said she wanted to reach out to the 2 leaders. I don't know if she hasn't yet or not. So about possibly a regional approach to all this, but I don't know.
Thank you. Excellent. And then for me at this point, so public comments, I believe we had 2. Were there any more that got turned in? Okay. I have JC Johnson on COVID data. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. I was like,
I'm hiding in darkness.
yes. And Brian Tooley, did I say that correct? Excellent. On cut sports policy for homeschooling / private school charter school kids. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so you will have 3 minutes. We're going to go ahead. I know we've had requests in the past to speak and then leave. So we're going to start at the beginning. I'm not sure the order. I just got them in this order, so I'm going to go ahead with JC Johnson first. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hi. I'm running out of words, guys, so I'll keep this quick. One, I'm wondering if there's enough data yet to agree that there's a problem that needs to be talked about here. Second, I'd like to know, has the board asked any of the local hospitals for data? I'd really like, and I think many of us here would like to see a presentation from our local doctors and hospitals to fill us in on data and the current situation in our community. I'd also like to ask you to call a special meeting to discuss these things since it's not on for action tonight, with some more of that data from the local hospitals and our school district before next month's regular meeting. I'd also like to ask anybody here who agrees with me to go ahead and stand up. And I would also like to let you know that we have several parents who were unable to make it tonight because they have COVID that they got from their kids from school. So guys, thank you. We'd like to ask you to please do something. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, yep, you're up next. We'll have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Brian Tooley. My wife and I have homeschooled our kids for the past 8 years. And our girls tried out for volleyball this year, and we were made aware of a policy in the athletic handbook under priority enrollment on page 9. And that reads, when cutting is necessary, first priority for trying out will be given to full-time enrolled Napa School District students prior to the beginning of each sports season. Students that are not full-time enrolled in the Napa School District may apply to be placed on a waiting list with the athletic director at the high school in attendance, in the attendance zone in which they reside. Following the first day of tryouts, if there are spots available on the team, the athletic director will contact the parents and prospective students, athletes, notifying them of the number of openings remaining on the team. Those are the only slots that a non-Napa School District student may compete for. All interested non-Napa School District students can compete for the open slots on the team, but may not displace any Napa School District students. So I just want to bring that before you. It feels like a discriminatory policy. I know it was put in place in 2004, but it definitely doesn't go off of ability. It just goes off of if you're a Napa School District full-time student, where we feel like it should be off ability. So I just wanted to ask if you guys would reconsider that or talk about it and get your thoughts on it and see what the school board would think about that policy being changed. Do you guys have any questions for me? No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Consent agenda. Entertain a motion.
I'd just be interested in taking one item off that I have a question.
Okay.
It'd be on O, approval of information services disposal notifications. We just need that one. Or am I allowed to just ask the question now, or do I need to move it in order to discuss it?
I think typically move it.
Okay, that's what I assumed.
Yep. And so it will move, and Tammy will just move that to the very first new business item. And that was the only one? Anyone else? Okay.
Madam Chair, I move we approve the consent agenda items A through N.
It was moved by trustee Westfall, seconded by trustee Kidd. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say nay. Those are approved. And so then we'll go to item O, and trustee Keller, I'll let you.
Okay, my question, this is it's, we get this every month, typical disposal of surplus equipment, but I just have a question. It looks like we are getting rid of 630 Khajiit hotspots that are being donated. I don't know enough about that, and so I guess my question is, I know we recently purchased those were new, those were to help our students. So I'm wondering why there's no longer a need for them and why we're choosing to donate them rather than sell them.
Good question. The switch is to provide us with more flexibility. So we moved from this third party that then would resell somebody else's bandwidth directly to Verizon as the provider. And we have the same quantity of currently available of hotspots, but without the overhead of their management or their bandwidth limits. So it does provide us with a better student experience.
Great, thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions?
Yeah, a follow-up question. So, does that mean Lease could, when the decision to change to the new service renders these useless? They're not able to be used on the new service?
These were tied into the kind of their proprietary management system. They would be using somebody's network, I forget whose, that was their underneath it. But without paying for the Khajiit service, these weren't usable anymore. And we continued last year to run into bandwidth limits for kids trying to use them at home when we're trying to improve that situation so we can allow them to get all their schoolwork done and have other stuff that still happens to happen when you happen to be a kid.
One more follow-up question again. So the new service that we're going to is the amount that are we saving enough money for the new system to cover what we spent on the previous hotspots? Sorry, I didn't.
No,
On the spot follow-up question, did not give you enough at a time, but.
The budget numbers, I don't remember off the top of my head,
Yeah.
by any means. The part that I do remember is the new hotspots are being paid for by the emergency broadband or connectivity fund, excuse me, emergency connectivity fund, which is an E-rate funding mechanism that would allow us to do that. So at this point, we're getting those at no cost essentially to the district that is coming out of the federal allotment of dollars. Is how we're affording those and paying for those.
May I ask one more follow-up question as well? Thank you. Would these be possible to be sold, or is a donation really the only option?
I don't, the first shot was to give other districts in Idaho an option. And I don't know that we would have luck selling them.
Okay.
With that one, it's one of those things that, they might sell, but they aren't a real high cost item at this point,
Okay.
they weren't real expensive upfront anyways. So I don't know that there's enough value there to pursue it.
Thank you.
I'm curious as what kind of value, since you mentioned that, what would these?
I would say that, we probably bought them, without exactly looking at the data. My estimate is they were probably $30 to $50 each for the hotspots. Then the service above that, most of the money's made on the service. And the kind of typical cellular model. So the result here is, after you're old and been used and beat up a little bit, that number is going to be significantly a small portion of that.
Sure.
So helpful.
Thanks.
Other questions? Would entertain a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve consent agenda item O.
I'll second that. So it's moved by trustee Keller, seconded by trustee Simpson. Any discussion, further questions? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay.
May.
Passes 4-1.
Yes, Chairman Simpson, we have brought before you an item that you spent time on in the work session. This is an easement donation to the city so that they can continue to work and build wonderful sidewalks and wonderful intersections right near our elementary school. And so tonight you have the appraisal there for your review, which and then you have a stipulation or not the right word, a resolution for you to approve if you would like to consider that.
Chair for motion.
Yes.
I move we approve a resolution approving conveyance of legal title and granting of an easement to the city of Nampa for property fronting Endeavor Elementary School to assist the city with completion of a highway improvement project and authorizing the administration to take appropriate action to complete the transaction.
Second.
So it's moved by trustee Westfall, seconded by trustee Kit. If you'd like to speak to your motion.
We did talk about this extensively in a work session, and it's going to be a good thing for kids with the new sidewalks and all of that.
Any other discussion, questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Unanimously.
Item as well, we spent quite a bit of time in the work session. Our attorney was here to walk you through that. So tonight we have the suggestion for a motion for your consideration.
Whereas the board recognizes that vaping is a national and local problem impacting upon student health and disciplinary operation of the district. Whereas multi-district litigation is pending against Juul, as well as its shareholder in federal court. And whereas the board, having considered the inclusion of the district in this multi-district litigation and having found it to be in the best interest of the district and its students, I hereby move that the board take all necessary steps to join this lawsuit as a plaintiff against Juul, and hereby authorize and direct the board's chairman and our superintendent to execute all necessary documents to that end.
Second.
It is moved by trustee Kit and seconded by trustee Westfall. Any speaking to your motion, trustee Kit?
Vaping is a problem. It's a problem in our district, it's a problem across the country. There's concern that Juul has particularly targeted young people in its marketing campaigns. And so I stand with those districts across the country that want to prosecute them.
Any other questions, comments, or discussion?
Yeah, but just note that trustee Ross had a lot of questions as if this was going to not cost the district.
Yes.
So just wanted to share that.
Excellent. Thank you. Seeing nothing further, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Is unanimously.
Anita Christensen-Coons is here to help us walk through really quickly the continuous improvement plan. Again, both of these documents you spent quite a lot of time on in our work session. Anita has made the corrections that you suggested. And there is one update that she does want to share with you that we received today through email.
Good evening. See you again. As we discussed last time at great length, I presented to you all the data that described all of these documents in great detail. We did receive an update from the State Board of Education today that they do want us to tweak the numbers on our go on rate section because they had some miscalculations. They resent it out today, and I did not get a chance to review the document because I got it midday today. But I would like to be able to address and put in their numbers. And our goal will still stay the same for the one-year high school graduation, go on before post-secondary on the third page of the document, maybe. It's not up on the screen, but it's the orange section that I know you can see online very clearly.
Fourth page.
Fourth page, thank you. So we will need to make the percentage will change slightly on the 1 year, go on to post-secondary education 1 year after, but it's such a slight change that the goal will stay the same. If you guys approve that, the big change will be the last one. That was where their big calculation error came into place. We're at like 45 point something on the calculation from the state board now. And so we'll switch that one over to the side there to 50%, I think was a good target goal for that goal one. Other than that, hopefully I captured all of your feedback and put it there for you.
So the 43 in the bottom right corner will be 50.
Yeah.
Okay.
After we get the other numbers changed from the board today.
Any other comments or questions on either of these documents? more time? Or-
Madam Chair, I move to approve the continuous improvement plan. More words than that.
I think that's fine, right? I'll second that. It was moved by trustee Keller, seconded by trustee Simpson. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I just appreciate all the work that goes into this. Is obviously quite the tackling project. And I think I was appreciative of pulling this up this week and seeing all the changes that we had talked about in place. And I think you've done a nice job, and I'm looking forward to watching this continue and see where our district goes. So thank you.
Anything else?
Just a question, the motion includes both the staff and the,
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't.
no, it is.
Yes, I would
Okay.
intend to include both. Yes, I wasn't clear.
No other discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. It's approved unanimously. Thank you so much for your hard work and all those that helped.
Thank you. So that's one plan that we'll submit to the state. We'll make sure that it's there before October 1st. We'll also have to include where it is on our website. So we'll insert that now that you have approved it. Our second plan due to the state, also on October 1st, is the ESSER ARP. And basically the requirements are pretty straightforward. There were certain specific questions we had to answer. We answered those based on what we tentatively have already said. This is what we think this will go, remembering that this board has not done a final approval on all the ESSER 3 monies. We wanted to wait until we saw what our November 1 count actually looked like before we made our final recommendations. So the only piece, and the piece that is new, and it's new because we wanted to give our patrons enough time to respond to it, is the survey data, and Mr. Jers is going to pull that up. We had quite a nice response, over 2,500, I think actually over 2,600 students, staff, parents, patrons, business responded. You can see that the majority of the responses do come from parents. Over 2/3 of the responses were parents, but you can see all of the groups represented there. Next, Peter. So if you remember, we talked about this, made some adjustments for readability, and what we shared here are those results. And so in order to kind of see whether or not patrons supported or didn't support, you really take those first two columns and add them together. And we will pull out those summaries. In all categories, more than 50% of our patrons agreed to it. In many categories, over 70% of our patrons, students, staff agreed to it. And only in several categories, they were even over 80%. So we did have one that was the lowest of all, which was the purchase of NWEA as a district-wide assessment tool. And we didn't really have a lot of time to explain what that was for or why that was important. But if you remember, this is the tool that we are just now using to identify the gaps that we need to really target in on and work with students so that the learning that they weren't able to accomplish last year, that we can really understand that and then move forward. So I don't know if you had time to look at these. Again, really strong results. Peter, next slide. These are mental health. This is really significant. I think school-based mental health, that's an 84%, almost 85% of those who responded supported that. And really similar to social emotional learning materials. So 77%, 78% of people who responded were really supportive of those ideas. Yeah. These are related to devices and technology. Strong support from that. Go ahead, down. Yeah, there is 2 pages. Same question, next page. And next. Vulnerable students. Here's another area, housing support actually came back fairly low when you compare it. And still, though, about 2/3 of our patrons said this is an idea that through McKinney-Vento that we would continue to pursue in helping folks connect with appropriate housing. These are items meant to give kids equal access to different types of opportunities. Next. HVAC, lots of ideas. There were ideas for which vendors we should use, what type of things. So we'll have our folks look at those ideas and thoughts and continue in that, realizing that we replaced several HVAC systems and are ready to go next summer again in order to replace those. Okay. So this was, I think, really interesting. I told you that there were many areas that were 80% and above. Our top area was to hire teachers to decrease class size. Probably not surprising, but a real strong showing of support. And then you also look at the do not support side. So not very many people who felt like that was a poor idea, several 5% in that category. And so you can see we've listed these in order of that combined strongly support or somewhat support. And then you can see whether or not there were more in the strongly support and some in the somewhat support. But really, actually, it's a survey we put out where we didn't have a lot of division, which is good. And most of the ideas that we have pursued were well supported. Next. All right, so these are sections. There were over 840 open-ended responses that we themed over the weekend. The highest one that came back were really things around raises, stipends, hazard pay, longevity bonuses, and this particular area was related to certified teachers. That was the most strongly supported and most common response. And then you can also see here something that Brian referred to, pay for covering classes. So we do have teachers who are giving us their prep time or taking on an extra 10 or 15 students. And so that idea came up. In addition, there were some thoughts about paying for COVID sick days. Remember that the federal government through March or March, they extended it, gave our staff 10 additional sick days if they needed to take it related to COVID. Nobody actually received it until they used it for COVID related things. Reducing class size, really actually highly connected, if you remember, to the question up above where it says, you know, hire additional people. So there were a lot of people who said, I'm going to say that again. In fact, 60 people mentioned that. Time to collaborate, classroom supplies. And then in that last column there, really what that means is there were a lot of ideas here and there wasn't a lot of cohesion around that. We also in that last column have said, with a really quick cursory look, are these things that are qualified that we could use in ESSER? So again, we didn't have a lot of time to explain to our patrons all of the areas that could qualify. And so many of these pay for covering classes, because that is, we can completely draw the line to COVID, would certainly be an expense that we could use through ESSER. Next area, really strongly supported right after that, our support for our classified staff, our paraprofessionals. Some approached it from increased wages, others talked about stipends or longevity types of things, bonuses. Many of them just encourage us to hire more substitutes. We would if they'd apply. But we have in the last few weeks hired a little over 25. And so we're excited about that and we'll continue to do that. Translators at every school is making sure that all of our families feel welcome. And then this idea about adding additional support staff through behavior pairs at the elementaries. I should have put elementary. Next. Mitigation strategy. So 84 people really wanted to share with us what they felt was appropriate. I do want to make sure that down in the other category, there were some comments saying, let's not do quarantine. Don't do any COVID mitigation strategies. There were some who said, hey, we should go back to remote or hybrid, and certainly listen to medical experts. So I want to make sure that we don't lose those thoughts in there, but there really wasn't a nice bucket that was consistent there. So lots of thoughts around face coverings, disinfecting, screening protocols. There were several that encouraged us to make rapid tests more available. Some were really focused just on teaching staff. Others were focused on, hey, if there are students who want to do that, make sure that they were available. Implementing physical distancing, several referenced last year's plan, and there were 4 who said, let's reinstitute contact tracing. Facilities, now we're getting down, so a little over 5%, and here's where people got really specific. So not only HVAC, but we really should consider this part of HVAC: scrubbers, filters, ozone machines, and then there were several places when people recommended vendors that were associated with that. New or improved Nampa High, that came up. You notice the no, new facilities, not appropriate under the ESSER funds, but certainly shows up as an interest. Care of our outside buildings, including other updates, windows. The idea with windows was making sure that there was circulation. And then deferred maintenance projects, and you can see that that really depends on what that project is. Can we relate it directly to mitigation related to COVID? Or if it's a tennis court, yeah, probably not, those type of things. Next. Curricular student programs, there was a lot of support associated with the arts, music, band, orchestra, and a lot of support for making sure that we don't forget our students who are advanced and in the elementary gifted and talented. Generally in our secondary, we have classes that are more rigorous, and some we call gifted and talented, and others we have students choose topics. So a lot of support there. Again, depending on what it is, and if we can tie the connection back to COVID, it may or may not be qualified under ESSER. A lot of support, well, 5 people who talked about preschool and full day, supporting CTE and hands-on STEM programs. And then there were some talking about, hey, let's talk about critical thinking, career counselor, adding more electives at the middle school, and ACT, SAT. Prep. And I'm going through this because you really didn't have a lot of time to review it. So a little less than 5 related to technology. We are already exploring this, but there were 6 comments talking about copy support for staff. If you remember, Copy Center was losing quite a lot of money. We've outsourced that. It sounds like maybe it's not as smooth as it could be, at least in several specific cases. There were some comments that say, hey, let's get rid of computers and iPads. Let's limit the amount of screen time. Those are represented there. Support for AV equipment in the classroom, TVs, cameras. A lot of these ideas were associated with, if my student has to stay home for whatever reason, can there be a camera in the classroom so they can access that instruction? Digital security. There are, again, depending on what we mean, some of that easily could be qualified for ESSER. We haven't yet explored rekeying, to some digital keys, whether that actually would be or not. I think that's more of a dotted line. General tech upgrades. So yes, there was support, but they weren't specific. So we don't know what that means. iPads for our support staff, that's focused on our elementary. And then again, in this section, several ideas that only 1 or possibly 2 had talked about. Net support is a specific type of software. There were some comments about stronger devices with more RAM for our students as they are using them. And then the iPad keyboards relates to our elementary programs. Next. Mental health. Again, some of these were really related to general comments. So we don't know exactly what they meant, So you can see there for both mental health and SEL. There were 4 who said, let's not do SEL. And then there were specific things, bullying and harassment, mentorship, and an encouragement to remember to focus on students. Special education. You notice in this qualification, we did receive a separate pot of money from ESSER, specifically targeted to special ed. So all of these would be okay under that pot of money. They also would be okay under the regular pot of ESSER money. One that I found really intriguing and exciting, and I've already talked about, activities for special education students. Several people said, are there things that we can plan specifically for our students who may not have the same opportunities as others? Really popular, more special education paraprofessionals, paying them more, and making sure that they were in the classroom. There were ideas that were really directed at spending this money to support families. The first one was related to making sure classroom supplies were available to all students so that families didn't have to spend money on that. There were some ideas around parent education. I provided you some examples there. Some general comments like, yes, we should help some of our families who are struggling, closing closet, gas, food, groceries. Someone suggested helping our families who have experienced death related to COVID. And I think I must have forgotten one because some of them were more FCRCs, but there was a comment who said no FCRCs. So I need to go back and correct that because there was one. Next. Providing extra time for students. Tutoring actually wasn't on our original plan. It's something that we should probably go back and look at. Support for after school academic support. And although there is some comments related to some before school care or academic, it didn't score as high on the when we were asking about it, because that was on our brainstorm. More support for after school, not quite as many excited about before school. Credit opportunities, credit recovery. There were some comments about please don't go outside of the school at all. That's not where this money belongs. Busing for programs, summer school, and social fund for students. These are related to our pupil personnel staff. So that's a state category. Most of these folks don't have a classroom of their own, but they serve all of our students. Our nurses will, I think, appreciate the fact that we recognize that we need more nursing positions, paying them better, increased wages, stipends, etc. There was support for counselors, career counselors, and social workers as well. Some curricular items. So financial literacy class, college prep class, more EL support, robotics at the middle school, and then other very specific classes, entrepreneurial, a speech class, and we do offer speech in several places, but that was, I didn't get any more insight into that than that. Spanish in the elementary schools, more PE, and then assemblies. Instruction, there was a group that just said better instruction, which didn't give us any additional specific information for us to act on. There were 2 who said, let's not do combo classes. There was some support for one-on-one instruction, alternative schools, engaging activities, and equal grading was the word on the comment. I'm not exactly sure what that meant, but that is an exact quote and wanted to make sure it was represented there. Next. Budget and finance ideas. There were 4 folks who said, hey, no more levies, if you can make that happen. And we'll talk about this at the work session, but you remember that there are many things on the levy that could be ESSER qualified. There might be some things on the levy that might not qualify for ESSER 3. So we can look at that in more detail. 4 people encouraged us just to give the federal money back. Others reminded us, please make it sustainable. Remember, it's one-time money. I love this idea, but it's not viable to create an endowment. That's not something that we can do with the ESSER money. Use money to cover enrollment blocks. And that's why this recommendation is not coming to you until after our November Friday count. Give some funds to the building level. And what's interesting here is ESSER 1 monies, that was a viable use, but in ESSER 2 and 3, it was not an appropriate use. Encouragement to balance the budget and some encouragement to use local contractors. More curriculum ideas, a group around library, and then all of the rest of them were just one. So no socialism, no political views, add democratic curriculum, add gender and racial equality curriculum, more digital curriculum, diagnostic testing tools. So those were all one that fell into that curriculum. We can skip that one. I did that one, obviously, yeah. And then there was this other category where some of it was ideas and some of it was just encouragement. So again, focus on students. There were some statements that generally supported the district. There were some statements who said they didn't support the district, the board, or the superintendent. Later start for secondary schools. Some of them said, ask the teachers. They know what we need. Please ask the teachers. Comments related to no early release on Wednesdays. Comments about who we should elect as president. And then some comments really focused on the survey itself. Wish I would have known more. It felt a little vague. Didn't have enough information for me to give you some ideas. And then finally, cell phone blocking devices for classroom and EFT cards. And it just said EFT, so we'd have to think about what that meant. It might have been connected to supporting teachers and supply cards, but there wasn't any detail there, so I don't know. Okay, I think that may be it. Is that correct, Peter? All right, so that's the survey. Many of those ideas are already incorporated into the document. If you'll bring up that document. Because we just compiled that this morning, our departments haven't had a chance to look through that, but we will, and we'll come back to you. So tonight, what we hope you've previewed are just some really general statements that we've talked about. Many of our districts actually have worked together to make sure it meets the federal guidelines on what we need to do. If you go down through the bottom, Peter, there is an assurance checklist that says you must address this area, this area, this area, and this area somewhere. Yeah. And so those are the areas that we had to address, and there was a question in each one. So happy to answer questions either on the survey or this document.
Madam Chair, if I may, I just have a couple of questions of things that were new to me, so just some clarifying. On number 5, in talking about in the answer, it says the district will engage staff and students in emotional well-being through our work with the HOPE survey. And I'm just wondering what that is, and you could tell us a little bit what that is.
As we talked a little bit in the superintendent evaluation, what kind of benchmarks do we have if we're going to spend time investing in social emotional learning and mental health? How will we know whether or not that's making this difference? So it's designed to be a pre and post so that we can look to see whether or not students and staff are finding those resources that they need, feel like they have resources in the community or have advocates in their corner. Those are the types of questions associated there.
Thank you. I have one more question that I'm trying to see where it is. And this may be information that is going to be forthcoming in this meeting, but you mentioned in here that rapid tests have been purchased for staff members. And I just haven't heard that yet. So here it is. I'm sorry. It's under number 2, the last paragraph. We have recently purchased COVID-19 rapid tests to ensure, and you made reference to that, but this was news. So
Sure, yeah. So we have been concerned at our staff members who have been exposed and have symptoms or not. And so mostly those who have symptoms, they go and they get tested. And I think I shared in a Friday letter that it's taking 4 or 5 days for that to come back. And so we did send Mr. Jers out into the world to find us some equipment aren't available very much. So that if staff chooses to take it, not mandatory for anybody, but if they choose to take it, it comes back negative, then they go back to their classroom with mitigation strategy. So if you are aware, the governor did allocate $2 million to public schools. We're working through the process to access some of that. And some of those tests can be paid for with those monies. We can buy additional PPE with that. We can support people as they contact trace, because we are contact tracing adults, and doing our data and things like that with that money.
thank you.
Any other questions? Miss? Okay. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the ESSER plan as outlined in the agenda documents.
I'll second that. It's moved by trustee Kit, seconded by trustee Simpson. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, we've been talking ESSER monies for several months, and the administration's kept us really well apprised about the different buckets is the language we've used around here and how that money is going to be spent. And we're just moving toward a final approval as we look toward the ESSER 3 funds. And these are things that appears are most beneficial for the district and for kids.
Any other questions, discussion, comments?
No, I think the language was very general and broad-based, and I think recognizing that this satisfies the requirement that we need to do by our deadline, and also gives us a lot of time to still look at budgeting for more specific line items in the coming years.
Anything else? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. It's approved unanimously.
This is just informational item. We did have a couple of trustees say, hey, we'd really like to hear from our nurses. So tonight we have invited Rebecca Burley, who's going to share some perspective from a on the front line nurse in our district.
Okay, good evening. I want to thank you all for inviting me to share a nurse's perspective our 21-22 school year. My name is Rebecca Burley, and I'm the nurse coordinator here at the school district, as well as the nurse at 2 buildings. I have a unique position to see the wide and focal nurse perspective. Prior to working here at the district, I was a med-surg nurse at St. Luke's for 12 years, and I love nursing. I always have, and I honestly hope that I always will. We have amazing nurses here at the Nampa School District. We are dedicated to maintaining the health and wellness of all of the students at our district, and we have gone above and beyond to do all that we can because we are passionate about it. Unfortunately, our nursing team is not fully staffed, and those unstaffed schools have increased the workload for the nurses. We've had to share this extra load in order to ensure that critical meetings are attended, parent contact that needs timely responses are made, and reports are documented. This additional work would be a lot for our nurses in a typical year, but this is 2021 and this is not typical. On any given day, we're working extra hours, typically without a lunch. This is not to get ahead of the tasks, but just to stay afloat. The state requires us to track immunizations at the school level. In non-COVID years, by this time, we would have a good understanding of those with immunization needs at the school. Letters would have already gone home to parents whose children need additional immunizations. We also work to organize and document the health information of our students into our computer system where the teachers can view that information. And this year, more than once, I've heard the nurses say, I just hope that I haven't missed something big. Despite working 10+ hour days, we do not have time to get the work done and help manage COVID-19 without protocols in place. This year, we've spent many hours each day making calls to collect information about positive COVID-19 cases in our students and their families. We carefully track this information to a growing list of positive cases among students themselves or to a list of students who are close contacts of a positive case. With our health department bombarded by the number of confirmed cases and with home testing available, we learn of the majority of these cases when a family member informs the school. Because we are not doing any contact tracing, the self-reporting gives us just a hint of what is happening in our schools and in our community. Unfortunately, we receive this information often too late to help protect children and their families in the classroom. Many hours each day are spent on the phone talking to students' guardians, giving them badly needed information, answering many questions, and offering advice and suggestions, all concerning COVID. As nurses, we love our jobs, and we want our school and our community to be healthy. We find ourselves in the middle of a pandemic, and our community is struggling. It's exhausting and it's sad. We never catch up, no matter how many hours we put in. All of our nurses are behind where we want to be. It's causing a loss of sleep. It's affecting our time with family, and our health is at stake. We're tired, we are stressed, and something needs to change. In the 2021 school year, we had a clear guidance and mitigation. We followed it well. If my numbers are correct, we had 463 reported cases of COVID in our student body last year, spanning over 10 months. This year, all that guidance and mitigation that were in place last year was pulled from our reopening plan. We're just over 4 weeks into the 21-22 school year, and we have 423 reported student cases. I suspect by the end of this week, we will surpass last year's total numbers. This is a problem. Please make some hard decisions for our school, for our students' health, and for our community's health. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I'd like to ask, Ms. Burley, you said, I tried to write down what you said, but there's not enough time without the COVID protocols in place. What kind of protocols would be helpful?
You know, I think if we can reach out to our community health providers, they're telling us we need to be doing these mitigation strategies. We need to be quarantining people that are exposed to COVID. We have families that are calling us and saying, I have students that go to the school that are not symptomatic. And I understand, it makes sense. If my kid's not sick, I want them in school, and I understand that that's a good thing. I can't give specifics because that's obviously giving up information, but I have confirmed cases where a student wasn't sick, continued coming to school, and then 4, 5, 6 days later started having symptoms, and then they exposed their classroom because they chose to be in school. We don't have those policies in place that require them to stay at home while they're being exposed at home. So I do think that's important.
Quarantining and contact tracing, those.
Yes, I mean, I think that's beneficial, absolutely. It scares me honestly to do contact tracing just because I know how much it goes into it. It was a lot of my job last year. And the numbers last year versus the numbers this year, honestly, I think it would take 3 or 4 of us to monitor and track all of our confirmed cases and their close contacts.
How many nurses are we short right now?
1.
Just 1?
Yeah.
And even with that, we're working long hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quick question. Do we have, I know, we have nurses and the jobs that you're doing right now weren't meant for the normal nursing per school or shared schools. And then we have paraprofessionals and those that help teachers. Do we have anything like that for the nurses as far as maybe some admin helpers or staff or anything for your?
So currently in the schools,
Yeah.
so I follow 2 schools, and there are, the majority of elementaries are 2 schools. Your office manager and your office secretary basically take up that job of school nurse when you're not in the building. So in some instances, yes, they do help with that. They manage the day-to-day bumps and elbows and, you know, ice packs and those types of things. What ends up coming to us, because they're not able to kind of walk through that process, is the COVID questions. So we're making phone calls. As soon as I walk into the door, I have a list. Can you please reach out to these families? They don't know what to do. And it's both schools.
So you could use some helpers.
Yeah, we could use lots of medical helpers.
What I'm hearing though, more than help, we need some mitigation strategies.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
maybe both.
Yes, both. We need both, honestly.
Yeah.
We're short-staffed, but we need to put some things in place. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
There's some additional information that I can't see, but Mr. George will bring up. So many of these documents the board has seen before, we just put in the most recent. So we get information from Southwest District Health, which really tells us daily incident rates with people that live within our attendance zone. That's not students and staff who go to Nampa School, but the attendance zone. The most recent one, which just came tonight at 4 o'clock and is not in your, the daily attendance rate per 10,000 is 6.75. So it was at 6 and went down to 5.9. It's back up to 6.75. So that's the daily incident rate, and it's normed to 10,000 people, right? So when we went through, and we have been sharing with you, and for anybody in the audience or at home, we do have these stats out on our webpage, and you can see the number of cases by building that we're reporting every week. So in the first week of school, which was a 2-day week, we only had 7 cases, and they happened to all be students. In the second week, we had 58 cases. And when we norm that or make it into a daily incident rate, our daily incident rate in that was 6 per day. If you remember in the Southwest District Health, it says below 1, between 1.1 and 2, 3 and 4, 4 and 5, and then there's nothing past 5 because we don't really want to be past 5. So in our second week of school, we were at 6 per 10,000. In our third week of school, 10.8. Our fourth week of school, 12.1. Last week, 10.1. So again, in some cases, and what this tells us, honestly, is that our kids are likely more safe in the community than they are in our buildings, because we're seeing more rates and incidences out in our community than we're actually seeing in our buildings. And in some cases, quite a few more if we're looking at the daily incident rate per 10,000. Rebecca told us where we were with students. We were not at that point until the first part of January last year. And if you do those numbers, we're seeing about 3.5 to almost 4 times the number of cases for students and staff that we saw all of last year. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions that you have on any of the data that we shared with you or that I just shared here.
I just want to clarify, Superintendent, you said the incidence rate in the school is higher than outside the school. So students would actually be safer if they weren't coming to school in terms of COVID exposure. Okay.
All right, so another couple of pieces of information for you. Today, when I looked at Power School, we had 13,787. That's up about 88 kids than the last time that I was sitting here and sharing that with you. Our attendance has improved some. Our elementaries are sitting right around 91%. Remember that they should be at 95, 96, 97%. So we're still behind there. Our middle schools and high schools are sitting in the last week combined total at about 87%. Again, we want them at 91, 92%. Middle schools a little bit higher. We like to see them at 93 and 94. So we still are seeing larger numbers of absences than what we typically do. 24 unfilled sub positions today. So actually we celebrated a little bit. This was the best day we've had in a really long time. But that means that 720 students didn't have a qualified teacher in their classroom today. And tomorrow, we're already behind. We think we'll have about 30 open classrooms. They may be the same set of students, they may not. But we are concerned about the quality of instruction because we're not able to get the substitutes that we need. One of the things that we did share with you in here is the chart and the prediction model. Most of these came out of our hospitals, St. Luke's, St. Al's, and where we think we might be by mid-October. The scary numbers were about 30,000 cases per week by mid-October, about 2,500 hospital admissions. And the chart that we shared with you in here demonstrates that we are actually on track to meet that number. And then we also shared with you the increase in rates for our children that are between 13 and 17. I am not sure why Idaho Department of Health and Welfare chose 13 to 17, but that was the data that they shared with us. In early June, there were less than 100 incidences per 100,000. And we are now sitting at about 450 incidences per 100,000. So that's more than quadrupled since June.
Bring that chart up, please.
The last one. The last one.
So if I understand correctly, that mark was the highest mark in any age group ever in Idaho that has been infected in a week.
I can't comment on that, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I understood from news reports that number, and Jefferson was head of Idaho Health and Welfare was the one who was reporting that, which was staggering that the 13 to that age group is the ones that were the highest infected in that time period, which I think was last week.
Which is really consistent with our attendance issues, right? So we are off in the elementary, but we're really off in the secondary in that 13 through 17 range. Okay. So I did want to share with you one last thing I think is COVID related, and it's about the efforts that our teachers are putting forward. And we heard Brian talk about it. We heard Rebecca talk about it. Our nurses are absolutely amazing, but our teachers and our paras and our office people are also doing an amazing job. But I need to tell you, we cannot sustain this. People are tired, they're weary, and there are a lot of barriers that they're facing. The first one is about not having 15% of your kids in your classroom. It's like if you were planning a family dinner for 5:30 and some of your children or family members
sorry,
needed to show up.
May we please take a recess, please? Please. I don't appreciate being scolded at this point when there is something that she can do about it as well, and I need a recess. No.
Let's take a quick, what do you need?
95 minutes.
5 minutes. 7:39 is Sorry, we'll go ahead and come back from our recess, please. So you can stop your conversations, please. Thank you. We're gonna come back and we were getting an update from the superintendent.
So our staff are dealing with 4 significant barriers that we need to be thoughtful of when we're looking at it. The first one is about how many kids are missing. And the analogy that I'd like to share with you is that family dinner. And somebody says we're going to eat at 5:30, but some of our family members need to go at 4:30. So they're not going to get everything because maybe the bread's not done or maybe the main course isn't done, but we're going to feed them at 4:30. Some of them do come at 5:30. Others don't make it at 6:30 or 7:30 or 8:30. And so you pull that food back out, you warm it back up. But the meal at 6:30 and 7:30 is not the same quality as what the family got at 5:30. Our teachers are working extremely hard at providing strong instruction for students. But when we have children, this many children missing, they're having to come back and do this for this student, do this for another student. Some people, maybe they're going to be out and they want it beforehand. They're working really hard, but it's a task that they're not going to be able to sustain very long. Illness, we have a lot of it. Not all of it is COVID, but whether it's flu or strep or COVID or allergies, we're grateful that people are keeping kids home when they have those symptoms. But when teachers are around it and they themselves are catching it, then again, we don't have quality personnel in front of our students, giving them strong instruction. One of the things that I think Brian referenced was covering classes. Our teachers have done an amazing job at saying, yes, I'll take care of that first period class for you. Yes, I'll cover third period for you. We have elementary teachers taking other teachers' children, bringing them together and working with 35 kids during that day because we don't have a substitute in that building. They lose their prep. They may have to do their prep during their lunchtime, so they're losing their lunchtime. They're impacting their family life because they actually are prepping at home because they don't have that time during the day because they're helping us out so that we can make sure that kids are supervised, not even taught in some cases, but supervised. And if it goes back to those goals that we set, and we want quality instruction in front of kids, it is not happening consistently because of the things that we're talking about here. Not because our teachers aren't working hard. We have principals acting as referees. We have district office people serving lunches. We have parapros and office folks going down to the library and supervising 2 classrooms. They are wonderful people, but we're going to have to provide them some relief. We are working and is hiring as many subs as we can. We'd love to hire additional medical people. We do have jobs that are posted out there. Many of them don't have applications for us to look at. So we're trying and doing those things. We are working on a way to try to compensate our teachers who are consistently giving up their time. But as Brian said, that only helps a little bit. And then you really do need your prep. You really do need some time at school so that you're not taking away from your family time. I think the final thing is really about caring for staff and families and students who are experiencing, I would say unprecedented, but maybe what we've been experiencing over the last 24 months. And we have a lot of mental health issues beginning to come to the top. We have children who are afraid that they might catch something, or we have children who have lost their parents. And we have that every year, but we are already seeing numbers that are above that. And we're stretching our counselors and our mental health workers and our teachers. We have teachers that are dealing with loss in their own family, a parent, a sister, a brother. And we're working to support them as well. I wanted you to be aware of those barriers. And I wanted you to be aware that when we're trying to make decisions at keeping school open, that's one thing. We'd like to keep school open with really good instruction. And we need to begin to think of ways that we can do that so we can keep quality instruction in our classrooms. And a friend once that shared an analogy at a national park overlooking, maybe it was a valley or waterfall or something. And the Park Service goes and they put up a fence. People cross over that fence. So then they make the fence a little higher, or they put some chicken wire there. So that it's really clear that there's this border. We're kind of sitting on that fence. And that fence, we're doing our best to keep schools open. We are doing our best to monitor, to move resources. And I just need you to be aware that the toll that it's taking in the classroom, with our staff, with our administrators is pretty significant. They are amazing people that we're asking to do a lot. We've sent them to the front line with maybe not everything that they need in order to be successful at the front line. So that's what I wanted you to hear tonight.
Any questions or comments on this topic?
I have a couple of questions. I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase them so that I don't come across as sounding calloused, because that's not my intention. And you're saying the first barrier is not having the attendance, but that I'm also hearing we really need to have kids not in the building if they've been exposed. Like, how do we balance that? Like, it's really tricky, right? Because you're saying kids aren't there. We need kids in classrooms, but yet we need kids to not come if someone in the class has been exposed. Where do we find the balance between those two things?
Rebecca, what do you know from your experience about kids who are homesick? As far as, are they staying home because they're not very sick, but they're or are they sick? What are you noticing as a school nurse?
I'm seeing both. Home just sick because they, had the sniffles, and then I'm seeing home can't smell and taste.
Right.
So I'm seeing both. I think what we need to determine is at what point do we decide where kids need to come to school or not come to school? If you've got family members that are confirmed cases in your house, should you be continuing to come to school? I mean, statistics I've seen show no, you shouldn't be there. So that's my concern.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a great question.
Yeah,
I think it is a balance.
Yeah.
But the numbers that we're seeing are just really significant, and we do have many of them who really are sick and not able to come.
Okay. And do we know are teachers being able to supplement with work? I know last year we had the Wednesdays, and so they were able to kind of check in. I know that's not the case this year, for better or worse. But are these children just not receiving any sort of, if they're home, is there anything happening?
I think that spans the whole gamut, right? So you have a student who doesn't contact the teacher, and we don't know if they're gone a day or 2 days. We have other students who parents are saying, I think that they're going to be out for 3 or 4 days. Could you help me with? That's the 6:30 meal. So yes, I'm going to give you some things, and I am going to try to support you. But it's not the robust instruction that they would have received at 5:30.
Another question regarding secondary education is something that was mentioned in a previous board meeting, and then it was a little bit mentioned today as part of the survey, is putting cameras in classrooms so that secondary students, and maybe even elementary, depending on the scope of this. Is that a realistic vision? Is this something that could actually really happen sooner than later, that we could have cameras so that kids can watch it? Is it happening?
Do you know the timeline?
The answer is we are waiting for our capital expenditure form approval from the state. And then the PO is already done. We'll be able to get the stuff. The equipment will ship. A couple weeks later, we'll have it here.
And is that in every classroom in the
And
district?
it's focused on high school, where we're dealing with credits and loss of credits and whether or not the student graduates. So we'll start there and then see how far.
And so I know we're waiting, but is there a timeline for that? Is that 2 weeks? Is that 6 weeks?
There's obviously time to ship, 250 devices and, boxes and that stuff. I would say that, having the first devices in there in 2 weeks is probably reasonable. Having them all deployed, it's going to take a little longer than that. It is kind of mentally in planning a project the way I would think about it. We are waiting for that one approval that we still have to get.
Okay, and then how will the students be able to access that? Is this like a Zoom?
It would be in Microsoft Teams. So there would be Teams and have a recording of the meeting so they could do it synchronously or asynchronously. If the meeting class was recorded.
Can I follow up? Are you done? Am I interrupting you?
Oh, go ahead. I'll come up with more if I.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up with something that that was said about there are kids that are exposed at home, and then in some cases they're coming to school. Is that what I heard? Is that correct?
That's correct.
So do we not have a mechanism to exclude those kids?
No. So right now, we don't have any strategies in place to require those students to remain home that have been exposed in the home.
Okay, so what state law doesn't allow us to do that? Like what do we?
It's not in our reopening plan as of right now. So the only thing that we require is if you tested positive or are probable for having COVID, that you remain home for 10 days, meaning you're symptomatic or you tested positive.
So currently, we're not quarantining those who are close contacts who could be or exposed. And we're not contact tracing students. Those were things that were not in the open class.
Right, but with known COVID cases, we're not asking those kids to not come to school.
We can't mandate it. We encourage it. We certainly give the parents the information that they need to know, but because it's not in our reopening plan, we can't mandate a quarantine.
Okay, I appreciate that, but doesn't state law give the authority to schools to exclude people that are ill? I mean, do we need to?
So the student would be
necessarily
somebody
ill.
that's been exposed to mom or dad but doesn't have symptoms yet. So may not test positive, but in that period of time when they're exposed, they may test positive.
Right, and how do we know that they were exposed? That's just they're telling us.
Parents reach out to us and say, hey, I'm homesick, I have COVID. I'm good, or my kids are good, they don't have symptoms, they can keep coming to school.
Okay, so that would seem to be a problem.
It can be.
Any other questions? See any? We move to the next item, graduation requirement.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that we table agenda items 3F through 5E until the October special meeting. It's in the interest of time. At the end of the agenda, we have an executive session that we seldom have ample time to do.
I'll second that.
So trustees, we do need, I think, to take action on item H because we do have contracts in need of amending in order to comply with this new requirement. Other than that, I think everything can be postponed.
I would amend my motion then to leave item H on the agenda.
So I just want to repeat to make sure we have it. So to move item F, G, and I to the October.
And
Section 4.
4A, B, and C. 5,
Thank you. A, B, and C.
and then 5A, B, C, D, and E.
Let me take a second.
And I feel like you spoke to your motion. Any other questions? I'm just wondering about the upcoming meetings. Like in 5E, I heard 5A, B, C, D, and E.
Yeah, just with time, let's get to H and the executive session.
All those in favor, sorry, any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Passes 3-2. So we would move to agenda item 3H.
So that was mine. The part that we want to bring before you is the fact that we need to put in an addendum for our master lease agreement that we have with Insight Financial Services. That was approved by you guys in 2016. So this is an addendum to that. The addendum is to address the new Idaho legislation that's referenced here in the memo, the Anti-Boycott Against Israel Act. That's required for us to address that. So that's what we're doing. And that's why we wanted to get it out there so you were aware that this was and could approve the addendum. So we have to.
Madam Chair, I move we approve the addendum to the Insight Master Lease.
I'll second. It's moved by trustee Westfall and seconded by trustee Keller. Any discussion to your motion?
Sounds like something that we have to do.
Any other questions, comments, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Passes unanimously. We are now to 5F.
Madam Chair, I move be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Napa School District number 131 recess from a public meeting into executive session in the manner and for the purpose authorized by section 74206 Idaho Code to discuss matters pertinent to the district, specifically subsection 1B, to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent or public school student.
Second. Moved by trustee Westfall, seconded by trustee Keller. Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Westphal.
Aye.
Trustee Ross. Aye. Trustee Kidd.
Aye.
Trustee Keller.
Aye.
Chairman Simpson.
Aye. Excellent. Adjourn. Thank you.
That's so silly to do that.
All of that for that.
So tonight, can it